Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. Hopefully this is not a grim glimpse at the future for what perhaps we might have to experience, or perhaps even our kids might have to experience. Though, I think there are certainly some in many big Western governments who would seriously consider measures like this. As an example, China was actually brought up, as an example, in some of the UK government hearings that had been going on. So we should pay attention to this. Right. And also, this is probably the sort of thing that explains, as we've covered a little bit in the channel, the likes of Tencent and Netease trying to get a little bit more into the global market and not just the domestic market for them. All right. Tweets from Daniel Ahmad. China's game regulator continues to implement targeted regulations aimed at curbing game addiction among minors. Get this. The new policy states that minors can only play games for 1 hour on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays between 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. That's it. 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. That's your after-dinner gaming, and that is that. If you're a minor, you will be doing no more video games. As he says, it's a extremely restrictive policy. The previous policy was 1.5 hours per day. So, per day, we're down half an hour, and we are down from 7 days to 3 days. This is a humongous decrease in the amount of time that minors are going to spend gaming. And this is actually, as he points out, coming at a time when South Korea has just overturned its own shutdown law. And minors are going to be restricted at the account level using the existing real name registration and anti-addiction systems that exist. And he says here, as a reference, and I think that we need to look at the second order effects of this. He says, for reference, there are around 110 million minors in China that play video games today. According to Tencent, players under the age of 16 account for approximately 2.6% of its total player spend, which shows the overall impact won't be too significant, but it's still a notable chunk. I would maybe add an asterisk that says, for now. And I have a reason for that. I'll bring it up before we go to these Bloomberg quotes. The young people who play video games today are the high-spending adults who play video games of tomorrow. Now, I don't know about you guys, but if I could only play 3 hours of games a week, I mean, maybe I'd be spending time doing some other things. Maybe I wouldn't get into gaming as much, and maybe I wouldn't end up being an adult that contributes money to the games industry. So, while right now this does not directly target a massive chunk of Tencent's revenue, it is not particularly great, and we can talk about some of those industry effects. Now, from Bloomberg, yes, China will limit the amount of time children can spend playing games to just 3 hours most weeks, a dramatic escalation of restrictions which dealt a blow to the world's largest mobile gaming market, which is what China is, as Beijing signaled it would continue a campaign to control the expansion of large tech companies. Another quote, gaming platforms from Tencent and Netease can only offer online gaming to minors from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. On Fridays, weekends, and public holidays. So, I mean, hey, when the public holiday comes, at least you can do an hour of gaming. A top-level committee led by President Xi Jinping said that the efforts made to prevent the disorderly expansion of some platform companies had been a success. I do find that to be interesting because obviously this is in a Chinese context. Even in other markets, like, say, America, there are a lot of people who are worried about big tech platforms, right? And it just makes you wonder all of the various different systems of government in the world and how they respond to various different things. Of course, I think you can expect more draconian measures from the CCP. I mean, come on, it's not surprising, right, that this is where it's really going hard. Now, some other key points in the new rules include that all online games should be linked to a state anti-addiction system, and companies can't provide service to users without real name registrations. Now, that basically does mean, look, everyone's already in a big government database, but this just means more government database, more telemetry, more information, and of course, we all know about the social credit score system. and how that is, will be rolling out and expanding, and that things like, say, tweets, not that they use Twitter, but the equivalent of Twitter, that are not in the favor of the party line can get your social credit score docked. And I think similarly here, when you have all of this incredible telemetry for people, and if the state is worried about gaming addiction, well, they can just rebalance their own game, which is the social credit score system, to de-incentivize the behavior that they do not want. And I have to imagine the likes of Tencent and Netease are kind of quaking in their boots over this, even though obviously the domestic market and being close to the party does make them a lot of money in the here and now. Regulators will ratchet up checks over how gaming firms carry out restrictions and things like playtime and in-game purchases, and they'll be working with parents, schools, and other members of society to combat youth gaming addiction. Now, as for the effect in the industry, Netease slid by as much as 9.3% in pre-market trading, while Prosus NV, which is Tencent's biggest shareholder, fell in Europe. Now again, do you remember the spiritual opium story that we covered recently, right? Where that was in, Chinese state media? Is that almost a prelude to things, even though there were sort of retractions and rewording, like, is that a prelude to what's going on here? And then we even saw that that specific verbiage, spiritual opium, repeated in the Telegraph, which of course is a United Kingdom newspaper, and a big broadsheet paper, not a sort of, people have many criticisms of various different broadsheets across the political spectrum, of course, but this isn't just some tabloid. It's making it to the Telegraph, and they're even talking about spiritual opium. So that's why we do have to think about these things. So there you go. China's really turning up the heat. As you say here, what's next? Yeah, social credit score reduction for playing games at unsociable hours, a ban on playing more than 12 or 18 hours a week if you're an adult. Because if they don't want to have problem gaming in children, they might also not want to have problem gaming in their workforce. And of course, if you look at the situation with China and its population demographics, what happens if they get into a stage where they realize, oh shit, we've got, working age people are now becoming a smaller slice of our population pyramid? Oh, let's de-incentivize them doing non-productive things. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but these are all things that will be swirling around people's heads. So that's what's going on then.
Yep. That's the idea that you put forward of them balancing their own game hits extremely hard. That's exactly it. They can, using all of the same things that, a game designer will use to design player behavior, they can do that, but on the real world level. So like in an MMO, when it's like, here's your weekly, or here's, you get extra for the first X time you do something and then less, you can see that happen in real life. Yeah. You can see all of that incentive design and behavior design, but it's not like, I guess they can work it into real incentives, but that would be harder. So they can do all these soft touch incentives that feel like, oh, it's just your social credit score. That's important, but it doesn't feel as much as you get paid less for gaming, but you've kind of got the same feelings going on.
Yeah, well, it can go in other ways. Like social credit score can impact people's interest rates. Yeah. And something people won't as much know unless, you do a lot of looking into how things are in China. There's a lot of men, right, with one-child policy. Yep. There's a lot of men floating about. A lot of those men, what are they going to do? Well, they want to buy a house because that's an important part of, finding a partner, getting married. And all those family dynamics are very important. Well, they're probably going to have to, if they're going to be purchasing a property, do that on credit, partially on credit. Now, if the social credit score can change their interest rate, and then you have disincentivized behavior, such as gaming at unsociable hours, well, then you can really see large-scale game design being applied at a societal level. And I wouldn't be surprised if, that goes on there, and maybe they're the thin end of the wedge, but I would not at all be surprised if similar things end up happening in, in other markets. Perhaps in America and the UK it won't be from the government, but maybe it will be that some of these platforms get so big and so powerful that you kind of do want to do your dailies and your weeklies on a social network because of whatever reason that makes that worthwhile. These are all things to think about, and I think as people in the games industry and people who play games, who think about game systems, we are in a uniquely good position to think about these things and to really see what's going on for what it is. There's a lot of, because we've both bounced about the startup scene, seen 500,000, gamification companies and things like that. And, anytime I think as gamers we see some of those gamification companies, we have a bit of a laugh at, sometimes how surface level and how it just feels like it's hypey buzzwords. But I think when you have that more deep understanding of, game systems and all of that, yeah, you can totally see how this shit could legit happen.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just waiting for the day you see someone who's like a renowned online game designer move into like a high position of government, and you're like, hang on, what are you applying your skills for up there?
Well, Yanis Varoufakis, maybe I've mocked up his name.
Oh, yeah.
He was the Greek finance minister for a period of time. I believe he's now bouncing around some EU-related project. I forget exactly. But Valve.
Yeah.
He's responsible for, or at least had a large part in, lots of the in-game economy work that Valve did. Not super recently, but I think he was there at the ground floor for that. That's an example of somebody coming, economics interested guy, going from, I suppose, government and policy into game dev. Could it happen the other way? I mean, yeah, as you say, what happens when a government is seriously looking at societal level gamification? I mean, what happens when they maybe think, oh shit, well, the sugar tax hasn't really done as much as we wanted? Well, how about we try to get some of these incredible game designers in to try to work out other ways that we can incentivize people not to ingest as much sugar, because we can correlate insulin resistance over time with metabolic syndrome and then the amount of money that costs our healthcare system. Therefore, we have a very, very clear societal case in terms of amount of money spent on healthcare and in terms of stress on the healthcare system to start to implement these gamification things. You can absolutely see that stuff happening. At least I think I can see that stuff sort of happening. And yeah, games are going to have, the learnings from games are going to have more and more of a role as time goes on.
Fucking terrifying.
Sorry, yeah. Uh-oh.
That's genuinely a little bit scary coming from the perspective of, like, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people watching will know how many games can get into your brain. And a lot of that is because, actually playing a game is fun. But how many times have you done something absolutely mind-numbing for a platinum trophy? And then the government learn that, apply that somehow by maybe getting the people who designed those trophies in the first place over?
Yeah, I mean, look, if some worker in the government gets all of my telemetry and just thinks, oh, is that motherfucker playing Shogun 2 Total War till 4 a.m. doing another campaign? He's done this game multiple times before. This is just going to make him late for work. It's going to make him be underslept, meaning he's going to, be eating more calories and bad calories at that. This is not behavior that we want to encourage. Why on earth would somebody ever do that? If we find somebody drinking too much alcohol, we try to prevent them to do that. If we find somebody, drinking or, using too much of a controlled substance, we'll try to do something there. There are certainly people in the government who would probably see gaming, and I think, in the United Kingdom, in the United States, I think we can see examples in both of our governments of politicians who absolutely would subscribe to some of the things I've said here. So I hope they don't watch and they don't get any ideas. But you could totally see some politicians seeing that as a really good idea. And maybe China gets to go and boast about how well it's worked, and who knows how much I actually trust those numbers, but maybe that gives a certain politician a bit of the oomph they need. So worth thinking about all of these things.
Yeah. And then you think, well, how would they ever get that telemetry on you? Because, your government ID isn't attached to your Steam account. And then you look at what China have just done, because those key points in the new rules, all online games linked to the anti-addiction system. Companies need real name registration to provide services to users. They got that through via going, we're saving your children from gaming addiction. Also, we now have complete control over you, but we won't use that until we need to later on.
And with the, is it the, whatever it is for like sports culture and whatever, the DCM, or whatever it is, that like group in the UK, was working all those loot box, concerns, right? We talked about that like 2 years ago, I think. I'm fairly sure China was cited by a member of that board.
I believe it was.
And not in a, oh, this is draconian and, goes against freedoms. In a, well, look, they're trying to tackle this issue too.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think it's all good for the fun in games. And it's, of course, always a treat whenever we get to talk about something like Splitgate and a really good, happy story. But also, I think being gamers helps us to think about issues like this in a way where a lot of other perspectives in society don't. So it's good to do this shit and have a chat.
Yeah.
Now, there is one other little story here. You say here, a different note, poaching. Basically, the Yakuza series. Now, this is totally an aside story, but we thought we'd mention it. So the creator, Toshihiro Nagoshi?
Yep.
There we go, got it right. Is in talks to leave Sega to join Netease, which is interesting. And as you say here, Netease themselves have been hiring a lot of Japanese console game developers from across most major publishers, as have Tencent. Perhaps Netease are gearing up to follow Tencent into the West, but it has ramifications on established studios if they're able to yoink important staff. What does Yakuza look like without its creative lead, who literally transformed as a person as the series is being created, although he himself claims his personal style changed because of his girlfriend? That last bit was entirely fun and definitely vital to the story.
I mean, that's the thing, right? Well, a little bit of flavor on that.
Quite a transformation.
Because, I did want to cover this in the context of the overall story, because it ties into Tencent and NetEase making their moves out of China. Because obviously we covered the hell out of that with Tencent having so much investment in the West, and everyone going, well, what is this? Is this some cynical move for the CCP to take over the world through gaming? But I think it looks substantially more like, if you assume the rules of the market are vaguely functioning, this is Tencent going, like, the government will just completely pull the rug out from underneath our existing business. So we need to establish our gaming business in a place where it's not under threat.
Yeah.
And that's a thing where, we can't really judge them until we see what games they've released. We can kind of, we can have fears about what they'll do. But then you look at stuff like Black Myth Wukong and think, maybe they'll play nice when they come over here. Hopefully. And make games that the Western audience want. Because they can't make games that the Chinese audience want, because they're not allowed to play games anymore.
Yeah. And like from their perspective, when you were like 18, 19, 20, have it on a decent bit of authority that some microtransactions were partook in the direction of League of Legends.
Just a few.
This is obviously a good thing for Riot Games. Now, the 20-year-old of 5 years' time is 15.
Yeah.
And that 20-year-old can only play, or 15-year-old right now, can only play games for 3 hours. So are they going to grow up to be the whale the Tencent and Netease want them to be? Less likely if they could only do 3 hours of games a week. And I think that is why, along with the other things we covered in this channel, we're seeing these shifts in the market. And yeah, as you said, like, if it meant that just kept way more things like Black Myth Wukong, because they're trying to play to the more global audience, then yeah, hey, great. That game looks brilliant. We haven't talked about the channel, but man, it looks great. And I think it would be great if a game like that comes out and gets to be a bit of a torchbearer for, hey, Japanese game or Chinese game market is coming on. And look at this. They're making these incredible, big AAA feeling, great experiences where, where all the people playing, Dark Souls and all those great games coming out of Japan. Well, now there's a whole other big country and there's some great games coming out of it too. Like, that would be brilliant. It's just, can we not have the bad things?
Yeah, I mean, it's especially when they're doing things like hiring existing devs. They aren't just going, we know what we're doing, we'll take a stab. They're going, okay, we'll get leaders and experts from there. We'll pay them our obscene Chinese technological market money and see what happens. Especially when they set up studios in Japan and the West instead of, bringing these people to China. So it's interesting. It's like there's a lot of people, I saw a lot of negative sentiment over Nagoshi leaving Sega because the Yakuza series is, to say beloved's probably putting it lightly among its audience. Yeah. They love the shit out of it. And seeing him be poached by China just kind of feels, oh shit, well this doesn't bode well, which I can, I completely see. And to the extent of the Yakuza series, I agree with. But I feel like it's a decent show of faith from the Chinese companies that they are, escaping the government at full speed.
Yeah, they're probably not going to grab this guy and then get him to make, like, I don't know, like some mobile game that's tailored to the domestic market.
Yeah, it's not going to be okay. And here from Toshihiro Nagoshi, the creator of Yakuza, we've got Legend of the Monkey King 47. Like, it's not going to be that, I would imagine.
Yeah, that also is a mobile gacha game
Yeah.
that is an ARPG. Like, that's probably not what's going to happen.
No.
So there we have it. Little bit of chat of the moving and the shaking in the market and what that actually means, because it turns out that some video game restrictions that are being applied to Chinese children can actually impact the market as we experience it, and the more aware of these things, the better. So that's it for today's video. Hope you found it interesting. I mean, shit, I certainly did. And yeah, we'll see you next time. Take care.